Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. I really dislike covering Middle Eastern politics. You start disturbing blood feuds that go back millennia to the beginning of recorded time. But what we're looking at is a modern phenomenon. Let me explain. So Hamas recently started bombing Israel and, sending bombers into a music festival and just trying to raise hell in the way that they usually do. Now, Hamas is not a representative of the Palestinian people. When Israel was partitioned as part of the peace plan, these were the ultra radical, right-winged, authoritarian people, and they got delivered the West Bank. It's been theirs for almost 20 years, and they have spent most of their aid money on getting munitions and building bunkers so that they can shoot their mortars and rockets off and hide. That's Silverlight, I hear you say. How can they be buying weapons? It's simply not possible with the budget that they're given. First of all, there's some state actors and some mercenaries that are always willing to let things go relatively cheap. You're cleaning up, you got some leftover mortar shells or something. Hey, no questions asked, cash on the table. Might as well get rid of it, then leave it around. Also, in my generation, which is not really that terribly long ago, in grade 6, they were teaching us to build rockets. Our rockets weren't designed to explode. Our rockets were designed to go up, deploy a parachute, and come down. But little confession, little research in the library, and it wasn't too hard to figure out how to turn something into an explosive. How do you do this? Why? Match heads and sparklers. That's right. And nobody is going to say, oh, we can't let you have matches, because Palestinians are people too. They need to eat. They have gas stoves. They have regular fires. They need those matches. Nobody looks at sparklers as being an incendiary, but they are considered dangerous goods while trucking. And I'm not going to tell you how. We can build a fairly low-yield explosive warhead. Probably not going to kill anybody, but I never tried that part out. It definitely can break a few windows, really mess up somebody's car. And that's just a grade 6 messing around with what they know. Can you imagine what happens if you have the resources of the state put towards that? Again, I never tried to make mine lethal. But I can see ways that you would be able to extrapolate from that, or even go to the extra step to manufacturing C4, etc., etc. But this is still modern day. Remember, it used to be Hamas every couple months would fire off a couple rockets and Israel would bomb them. And basically the world told them, hey, don't be idiots. Once you send rockets into Israel, they're gonna respond. And Israel has done that every single time. Now let's get back to this historical context because it is very important. In the 1800s and 1900s, groups like the Rockefellers, the richest people, would buy land in Israel. The Palestinians were pretty happy to accept this land because it was desert. They're laughing at the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all those people, the Carnegies coming in and giving them money for desert. Stuff that had never and would never bloom, in their opinion. They took that money and they were able to keep their families going in a modest lifestyle for at least a little while. It's a pretty easy sell, in my opinion. Now, I'm not gonna blame the Palestinians for making this decision. But fast forward to 1949, and the way that Britain and a few others decided to divide up Palestine was the land the Israelis owned was on this side of the line because the British love their lines on maps. And the land that the Palestinians owned was on this side of the line. There was also provision in there for late neighboring states like Syria, Jordan, places like that, that they were going to take any overflow because naturally, when you just draw a line on the map, Britain had done it a couple times and they knew there'd be people that found themselves without anything anywhere. Well, the last second, Jordan, Syria, and places like that suddenly pulled their borders back and said, no, we're going to keep this land. We like it. We're not letting anybody come in. And this is why in the 1980s, you see people living on the border in tent cities, not being recognized as cities in the countries they were told to go to. And it's just a way to breed hostility. I'm not going to say it was done on purpose to do that, but unfortunately, that's the effect that it had. The purpose was to snatch some more territory for these smaller estates. But what it's led to, unfortunately, is Palestinian Sesame Street. Now, I do not know if they call it Palestinian Sesame Street, but that's what they call it on YouTube. It shows cute little puppets. Supposedly, I cannot confirm this as I do not speak Arabic, but supposedly encouraging young people to push the state of Israel back into the sea. And you have this little Grover-like thing, and it's talking in the high-pitched voice that those little creatures do, and encouraging some pretty horrible things. Now the problem has become multi-generational. I've said this before. I'll say it again. The average person in the street is not very good at differentiating fine political detail. Average person on the street sees an Israeli F-16 goes over and drops a bomb. That average person loses a leg. They're going to tell their children that the Israelis did it to me. Some rarefied examples might sit down and say, well, the problem was, our side was launching rockets at them without provocation, and this was a return strike. You might get a couple of those. Most people just say, oh, Israel gave this to me. And this has been going on since 1949. Because don't forget, the first thing that happened when Israel declared its independence is it was invaded from every single angle and every single country possible. Their literal baptism of fire. It's nice to sit back and say faults on all sides, but you also have this dynamic in the Middle East that's way more prominent than it is over here in North America of tribalism. Now, I don't mean tribalism in the same sense where the First Nations have their tribes and they have band loyalty, but it is somewhat similar. The way the First Nations used to be, where they had rivalries dating back for centuries. Oh, your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Order 66, my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. And that's the way these intertribal rivalries take place. If you look at the Kurds, for example, Turkey has been genociding them for years. Years and years and years. Why? Because they're not real Turkish like us. And Turkey is our NATO ally. And we're letting them literally try to wipe out every single person who half of them are Muslim and half of them are Christian. You can't even blame it on original, but they're the Kurdish tribe, and that's why we're going to go after them. Imagine how much more so in Israel and Palestine, where Israel keeps trying to say, okay, we'll give you land, Just don't bomb us. And those people keep bombing you. Now, the real question, as always, is why is the US so invested in this? Okay, 20 US citizens that we know of were captured. There's rumors it's more, it's less. I'm going to take 20 because that seems to be the average up down the middle. And they send the USS Ford, the newest, the biggest, the baddest aircraft carrier, and the fleet that backs it up. That's a bit of an overcompensation for what is essentially another Middle Eastern conflict. Well, because they have to protect Israel because they're just starting to get all their people in line. They had Saudi Arabia in their pocket by selling them weapons and everything, and now all of a sudden Saudi Arabia is turning around and saying, wait, we don't want you to sell our oil because you're using it to keep the market prices down. Excuse me, isn't that how free market capitalism works? If there's an oversupply, prices come down. If there's not enough supply, prices go up. But apparently Saudi Arabia doesn't appreciate somebody else doing the price manipulation to them. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember OPEC, but it's still around. And it's their choice on how they want to manipulate prices. Now, Saudi Arabia is suddenly going out on a limb and biting the hand that feeds them. Weird time to do that. Of course, officially, Saudi Arabia, who recently normalized ties with Israel, is expressing sympathy. Wait, what's this? Saudi Arabia and Oman, I believe it is, are saying, Israel is in the right. We are having the same tribal conflicts come up. Saudi Arabia considers itself the crown jewel of the Muslim world, which is why they get into conflicts with Iran. Because Iran also considers itself the crown jewel of the Muslim world. I've never visited either country. I'm not going to get on side. But the same token, Saudi Arabia is trying to have its cake and eat it too. They know the United States is going to do something. And they're trying to say, hey, we don't like you selling our oil for cheap, and we just might withdraw that support. Pretty clever of them. Not that they're not clever. I'm just saying, pretty clever time to use that little trump card and say, or maybe a reverse Uno card and say, aha, we want you to going back to selling our oil at a high price. So we have this weird mix of political intrigue that goes back centuries, if not millennia. We have countries that are willing to enter this coalition of the willing, but at their convenience and at their benefit. And the people who suffer, as always, are the people on the ground. Officially, I'm neither pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. In this case, with the massive attacks, I'm going to side with Israel. Like, if I start throwing Molotov cocktails at my neighbor, I expect them to call the police. And these are nations. They have police. They're called the military. So, like I said, in this case, I'm going to come down on the Israeli side. I acknowledge the Palestinians have gotten a raw deal, but they're being force-fed propaganda that says, oh, Israel's the one who gave the bad deal to you. They're not being taught about the British. They're not being taught about their neighbors, Jordan and Syria. Just all fingers point to Israel. It must be Israel who are the bad guys here. That's a convenient narrative for Hamas because, again, if your father is telling you, oh, the Israelis are the ones who made me lose my leg, you do feel kind of justified in getting back your pound of flesh. And yes, I'm using that expression purposely. Because apparently you're not supposed to use it anymore. But I have a little out as far as that goes. We have China rumbling about war. We have Ukraine that we're going to go into the third year of this in February. This is not the Armageddon where there's wars and rumors of wars. No, these are brush fires all over the place. Palestine and Hamas, I should say Hamas, because the Golan Heights Palestinians seem to be a lot more peaceful, and Israel's recognized this by giving them a lot more trade opportunities and bringing them in on a lot more good negotiations. It's the West Bank which is the problem, and it's not just Israel who thinks that. Egypt has border security there, but the difference is they're ordered to fire on sight at any Palestinians because it's too much work for them to go through and figure out which are the ones that are trying to bring, guns, drugs, and all that behind enemy lines. No, they got burned once too often. Now they say that's it. Here we go. Nobody gets past this line. Who gets mad at Egypt? Nobody. They're probably more brutal than Israel, but they're being let loose because Egypt has a little bit better PR. And that's ultimately what this is a game of PR. Who gets the best public relations? The Palestinians will continue to attack because they can complain, oh, look at this, it hit our civilian forces, while they're cowering in a bunker underneath their stands. And Hamas is authoritarian. The nicest thing I can say about them is they're not ISIS, they're not the Taliban. That's but the nicest thing I can say about them. But when they've had 60, 70 years to indoctrinate the people, it's going to take, I don't know how long, to deprogram them. And you know what? Ultimately, everybody wants peace. It's just a question in how they justify it. The problem to the Israel-Palestinian peace process has always been Hamas and Hezbollah keep having control over the people. I mean, when you're in a controlled situation, it's very easy to manipulate how people feel. Keep them hungry. That's how Kim Jong-il keeps getting a 98% election turnout. And 98% of people will vote for him. Because it's very easy. Who are you voting for? Well, I have the right not to tell you. No, you don't. Not in our country. You tell us who you're voting for. And if you say the ruling party, you get to go to the one store where everything's, 50 cents cheaper. And if you're not, you pay 50 cents more. 50 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but as we found out in the past couple of years, a 50 cent increase really starts to hurt. So that's how they're able to control their populations, just very simply. If you want to eat, you vote for us. And they can turn around and say, we won that last election. And they can continue with their radical agenda. There's a whole history to this that dates back well before 1949. There was a point where the Jewish people in Israel were committing bombings to get Britain to give them a homeland. There was a point Madagascar was going to be the Jewish homeland. I would like to see everybody out of the Levant, the whole Holy Land, kick them all out, find them places to live, because going back 5, 7, even 10,000 years, we have records of war. Jericho, the famous city, goes back 10,000 years, and what is it famous for? Its walls. Do you know what you build walls for? To protect against other humans. So pretty much since we've been in the Middle East, we've been fighting. Ultimately, I want the fighting to stop, but it's not going to stop until you can root out those cells, terrorist cells from Hamas, Hezbollah, whoever have you, and then teach the people peace is better because we can make the world a better place. With that, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like, subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell down in the notifications, and we hope you have a fantastic day.